hello from Soldier Field, where it's been a disappointing day for Ireland, who've gone down 26-13 to the All Blacks. Revenge for 2016. My name is Rory O'Connor, and I'm joined by Cian Tracey. And as ever, our rugby coverage on Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia, who sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels. Energy Rugby for All initiative supports inclusion and welcomes everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. To learn more about their rugby partnerships and their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, visit energia.ie/rugby. Well, Cian, it's a bit of deja vu from this time last year when Ireland started off their November window with defeat to New Zealand at the end of a tight game that kind of blew open in the last 20 minutes. What's your kind of key takeaways from the game?
A lot of hallmarks of this time last year, for sure, when Ireland they looked undercooked, they looked leggy, and I think we saw plenty of that again here tonight. Very hard game, I think, to initially get your head around. It was so stop-start in that first half. Definitely looking forward to watching it back to see more of the intricacies of it. But I think the best place to start of the analysis of it is at the very start of the game, and Tadhg Beirne's 20-minute red card. And I'd love to get your thoughts on what you thought about it. But my take on the impact that had on the game, I thought Ireland managed the 20-minute red card period really, really well. They were 10-7 ahead coming up to the hour mark. But in the All Blacks, their bench was awesome. Wallace Atiti, who was the breakout star last year, who's had a few injury problems this year, was outstanding. Tamati Williams coming off the bench, outstanding. Damien McKenzie as well. And Ireland didn't quite get the punch that they were hoping for off the bench. But certainly my reading of it was that they had put so much into that 20-minute period in the first half that it came back to haunt them towards the end, that they had given so much. They're lacking match preparation, and all those fears that people had coming into the game, I think, came to pass. Now, that's not to give them a free pass whatsoever, because I think the All Blacks were there for the taking. Like I said, beating them 10-7 after an hour. Their skill execution was poor. I think that a lot of that was down to the pressure that Ireland put on them, but they were just blown away in the last 20 minutes. And I think ultimately that's what will stick in my mind when we're flying home tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, 3 minutes in, we were almost just settling into the game. The teams were almost just settling into the game when Tadhg Beirne, it didn't really pick up on it at the time. I think Scott Barrett went down around the same time. I thought the stoppage was going to be more about that, but it became clear quite soon that there'd been a high tackle by Tadhg Beirne on Beauden Barrett, contact with the head, a little shoulder movement forward into the head. I thought, my first gut was he's in trouble. And then the more I watched it, I mean, we didn't get to watch it much in the stadium. We'll come back to how shambolic this was in terms of an event, but the referee went off and did a VAR check a la football rather than a TMO check that we're used to. But he obviously goes for the yellow card. I didn't expect it to get upgraded, having seen it a couple of times. I was surprised when it did. We'll probably get clarity further on, when there's a disciplinary hearing, whether that's going to be upheld, whether he's going to get a ban out of this. It's Tadhg Beirne's first red card for Ireland. He apparently is devastated in the dressing room, feels he's let the whole team down. But that's not my sense of it. It was a fairly quick moment. Andy Farrell and you heard Dan Sheehan talk about it in the moment. They thought it was a forward pass, which changed the picture for Tadhg Beirne, who wasn't able to adjust quickly enough to it. And really, I think Pierre Brousset could have stuck at level. At yellow. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, it wasn't obviously Brousset's decision to stick at yellow once he went into the bunker. Essentially, I thought Brousset, and I absolutely don't think he was the reason why Ireland lost the game, was unbelievably fussy. I thought for both teams, it was so scrappy, so stop-start, and I thought he had a big role to play in that. And once again, he wasn't the reason that Ireland lost. But
he at one stage penalised New Zealand 10 times in a row during the game. So
yeah, it worked for both teams. I'm glad you said that as well. But yeah, Tadhg Beirne, I have a lot of sympathy for him. We've just come up from the press conference from Andy Farrell, and I thought he spoke very well. I mean, he was never going to hang the officials out to dry. That's not like his MO. They'll go through the back channels as usual. But he made a very good point that I'm sure the both of us and most listeners would agree that everyone wants the safest way forward for rugby, particularly at a time when it's like perilous in terms of like the head injuries. You got to protect players. But that, to me, Tadhg Beirne's action, like you said, the picture changed once the forward pass, and it was a passive action. We hear this so often when TMOs are reviewing potential foul play incidents, that was it passive, was he embracing the contact? And I don't think he could do much about it. I know he had his hands on his side, and I hate when players go in with that tucked arm, but I don't think that that's what it was. And honestly, I thought a yellow card would have been more than fair enough. I was stunned, I have to admit. I was shocked. We'd no ref mic to hear, what the conversations that were going on, which didn't help at all. I don't think Andy Farrell was able to hear it either, but I was shocked it was upgraded to red. I thought a yellow card would have been fine and can move on.
Well, yes, let's talk about the event for a minute. Yesterday, we were at a World Rugby press conference where the RFU Chief Executive Kevin Potts confirmed that Ireland will be coming back here every year for the next 5-6 years as part of a global strategy or a broader strategy to kind of build the sport in America, play more Tier 1 games here. I know Americans are used to stoppages in their sports, but the TMO decision went on for ages. They didn't get replays up on the screen. Normally in rugby games now, it's like the NFL. You can hear what the referee's saying, so at least the fans are clarity, and they have the technology to do it in the stadium because we know that they've all the technology. It's I know it's not the newest of the NFL stadiums, but it's able for that. The fans are just sitting there in their seats, not knowing what's going on. No replays. The players haven't seen it. The players didn't get to see a replay of it either, and it was kind of it took ages, and then he was sent off, and there was no clarification given to the people who spent a lot of money to be here, and that was just part of kind of the kind of strangeness of the occasion. I mean, they were playing, was it Phil Collins over the haka at one stage before the game? They got the New Zealand anthem completely wrong. And I just thought, the long stoppages, the lack of communication from the referee really undermined it. The pitch was in bad nick. I mean, I'd say it played a part in those 2 injuries for the All Blacks in the first half. We've heard it's not considered a great pitch in NFL terms. Players are talking about it's very short grass. I don't know. It just never really took off. And if you're trying to sell a sport, I didn't think that first half did anything for anyone.
Yeah, and it's 2 Ireland games in a row. I was over in Lisbon during the summer, and it was utterly shambolic. The TMO technology broke after a while, so there was no TMO in the match. And that was in, obviously, Portugal, much lower level tier. You're coming to a state-of-the-art stadium here. And rugby has borrowed so much from the likes of American sports by miking the ref up this season, and it was really poor, I have to say. I think you're right. This is a big period for America in terms of what's coming up. The 2031 World Cup, the host cities are going forward to try and get a piece of the cake once it rolls around in 31. And it was a poor spectacle. I mean, there was a guy going around on the pitch before the match and at halftime with green spray paint spraying over the unbelievable amount of sand that's down on the pitch. I was talking to someone last night who's a big Chicago Bears fan, and he was saying that the Chicago Bears are actually moving to another stadium because they don't own it here, and I think it's like the Chicago State or whatever, and they just haven't looked after the pitch. And when we were here yesterday for the captain's run, you didn't notice it as much, but we did flag it in our video that you could see Andy Farrell out kind of stamping down on the pitches and reminded us of Fukuoka at the 2019 World Cup, and Joe Schmidt was not happy at all. But again, look, the pitch isn't the reason why Ireland lost, but it was just disappointing.
It's part of the story, though. I think the event, because this was such a big event, and Chicago was amazing today, walking down to the ground from where we're staying, not too far from the stadium. This flood of green and black jerseys, people in American accents wearing the green and the black, and kind of getting behind it. And it's felt like a brilliant event all week. But I think if you're going to nail this, you've got to be honest about the occasion and how it's done, and they need to learn a lot of lessons from it, because even the lack of replays in the stadium just meant that no one had a clue what was going on. Ireland's performance, right? So we had, I thought, a very poor New Zealand performance for about 55 minutes until the game changed on that Tamadou Williams try on the back of 2 back-to-back mistakes from Jack Crowley. Before that, my sense was that it was Ireland who were going to kick on, that they had kind of got an element of control within the game. I thought they were making fewer errors, even though their lineout was absolutely terrible. 69% today, really undermined what they were doing. They were winning kick. Well, that's it. But I thought they were making fewer errors than New Zealand. They were winning kick battles. I thought they were in a really good place, and yet they let it slip. What's your kind of sense of how Ireland did, and where does this kind of performance leave you with Ireland?
The line out has been a concern
before the World Cup.
For a long time. And look, a big factor was Tadhg Beirne going off. He is Ireland's line out leader, but James Ryan has done it plenty of times as well. I know he went off for a HIA, so that was a factor, but you can't keep having the same problems over and over again, because it undermines everything that Ireland do. I mean, the line out is such an important key area of any team's game, but so much of Ireland's play comes off it in terms of strike moves and things like that. I thought their breakdown work was unbelievably sloppy. They were too slow to get to a lot of them. Gibson Park, again, not quite at his best. He had a few good moments, but a few kind of mad moments as well. You mentioned Jack Crowley. I thought he did a lot of things well, and I absolutely do not think that this defeat is on Jack Crowley. The scrum was absolutely mullered as well. Like, that has to be a concern, I think, for John Fogarty as well. So when your set piece doesn't fire, your breakdown isn't great. I think it's like harsh on the out half. Now, he'll be disappointed with a couple of loose kicks for sure. The one long range missed shot at goal. It certainly wasn't the statement performance that he was hoping for. But I think when Andy Farrell reflects on this, he'll wonder how it went so badly wrong in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I do think the preparation has to be a factor in that, and in the performance, and in those, being off it at the breakdown, that's a factor of just not having hit enough rucks this season. In terms of Crowley's performance, I think he did an awful lot right. I think what I'm kind of referring to is, and I think this was the problem this was a match that was won by moments, and Ireland had New Zealand where they wanted them, and just a poor pass selection. He hammered the ball at Jamie Osborne, it went to ground, and then it was compounded when he tried to run the ball back at New Zealand. One of the few times they didn't kick, and he got pinned down, and New Zealand won the breakdown, and they scored a try. And Andy Farrell referred to that after the game as the kind of two mistakes that kind of turned the game, because then I think it's a pretty poor reflection of where Ireland are at mentally. That, like, they were knocked out by that point. That was a knockout blow. They never really recovered from it. I thought when Prendergast came on, he didn't play well at all. He was chasing things. He looked really panicky. I think it was unfortunate for Craig Casey, who I think could have come on earlier, to be honest, that he was coming on with the game, beyond Ireland nearly at that stage. But it was I think in about 54th, 53rd minute when McCluskey goes off injured and Bundyacky's on the sideline, and the place erupts, and they're singing the Fields of Athenry. It really felt like it was going to be Ireland's day at that moment. And it just fell through their fingers like the sand they were putting on the pitch before the game. So I think it's a really concerning defeat in that way. They scored 3 points in 63 minutes of Test rugby. They scored 13 points across 80 minutes. Like, you're not going to beat a team like New Zealand, even when they're playing poorly, with that kind of return. And the way they kind of faded in the last quarter really worried me.
Yeah, I think they had no line breaks either. As I think Opta had, that's absolutely crazy when you think about it. Now, I think Ireland did a lot well. Like I said, they were on the hour mark, they were 10-7 up. I thought Stuart McCloskey was absolutely immense. I've just come from speaking to him in the mix zone, and the reason he went off is actually he has a groin injury, so fingers crossed that's not too bad. I thought he fully justified his selection. I also think it's worth highlighting Ryan Baird, who I thought was excellent, and even though the line-out didn't go well, his line-out defence was unbelievable. The one just before half-time where he got up and rolled the dice, I mean, if Ireland don't win that, the chances are they're getting mauled over. And I think if Ireland had gone on to win the game, we'd be looking back at that as a crucial moment. He had another one in the second half. So there were good performances, but I was really disappointed in, like, Ireland didn't get Tommy O'Brien into the game at all. Like, we spent a lot of the last week talking about him, how he's going to add a different dynamic in the back three. We haven't had a lot of pace like that in quite some time, and rarely got him into a bit of open space. Like, he was asked to chase a lot of high balls, and I think that is going to be a key part of Ireland's game plan going forward, as it is all the top teams. If you look at it, the likes of France, South Africa, they kick more than anyone, but I think you have to find a way to get players like that into the game. Look how well New Zealand did at doing it. Every time Will Jordan got on the ball, again, you're just thinking, oh no, here we go, he's going to do something. And actually Josh van der Fleer's try-saving tackle on him in the build-up to Ardy Surveyor's try was sensational, but Ireland just didn't recycle quick enough, and I think the 14 men obviously came back to haunt them there. So they'll be really disappointed that they didn't get their strike runners into it more often.
I think the game is going increasingly in the direction of being about moments and athleticism and being able to kind of make the most of chaos off a high ball. And I think Ireland are not a team at the moment who are set up to thrive in that game. I think they're no longer able to do what they were able to do when Sexton was at 10 and go through those multi-phases. The breakdown is such a war zone now that it's nearly impossible to take a team through 15, 20 phases. The attack doesn't look anything like, I thought the drop-off in levels from these two teams 2 years ago at the World Cup to what we saw today from both of them was frightening. And I think Ireland are really struggling to adapt to the modern game. I didn't see all of England's game in Twickenham today, but it was a lot of what I saw was based off them winning high balls and someone like Henry Pollock picking up a ball and running it through. And I think New Zealand, in a game of moments, are always going to win a game of moments because they have Wallace Satiti to bring off the bench. They have Ardy Surveyor, who's able to just surge over the line. And Ireland, they played well in patches in parts of that game, but they didn't have the quality to unlock New Zealand, and they didn't have the X factor or the spark to come up with those moments when they were needed. And that's kind of the frustration with it, because I just wonder as we go halfway through this World Cup cycle that the game is changing and Ireland are not evolving with it. And that's something they're going to have to see in the next couple of weeks, because Japan is an interesting game in itself, but Australia have players who can make something out of nothing. Not as many of them as South Africa, who are full of X Factor players and love that kind of contest. So that's a worry for me. But I do think the Irish players will get better. Like, I don't think Gibson Park, I think there's like Gibson Park, Dan Sheehan, a load of them just
and
look like
quiet game again, I thought, as well.
They look rusty.
Yeah, they look rusty. Yeah, of course. Like, it's not the World Cup comparison. While I totally get what you mean, but like, that's mid-season. It's a more of a level playing field, and it is going to take Ireland longer to get back up to speed. But all that said, we've spoken so often about how Andy Farrell is a no excuses kind of guy in terms of the culture and all that, and we've just come from the press conference, and his demeanour. If the demeanour with us is anything to go by, I would guess, without any inside info, that he read the riot act to them. He was so annoyed. Like I said, he kept his counsel about the red card, but he was pretty angry, I thought. And for a head coach who's coming back in for the first time and always working with the Ireland players on the Lions tour and all that, but for the first time since last November, I think he'd be really annoyed that there was a lack of bounce, there was a lack of oomph, that they struggled to get into their flow at a time where you'd be imagining the players would be jumping to try and impress the head coach again. I think Simon Easterby will be really concerned about how easy the New Zealand opened up the defence. Obviously, to concede 4 tries, Ireland's defence has generally been pretty good, but there were a lot of kind of scrambling last-ditch tackles, which, while, okay, it's great that they managed to do it, you prefer not to be in that situation in the first place. And I think that is a big concern going forward, because I think if the All Blacks skill level had been better up to that hour mark, I think it could have been a completely different game, because they created far more in their attack.
That's the thing. I genuinely was shocked. I was sitting beside Liam Napier from the New Zealand Herald, and I was saying to him, and he seemed to be agreeing. He wasn't saying much back to me, but I was probably annoying him. But I was shocked by the error count from the All Blacks. They were forcing things. The last pass just wasn't sticking. And in fairness to them, they kept at it. They kept their belief. They didn't drop their heads. And eventually the passes started to stick and they got their scores. So they weren't affected by it. But I thought they kept Ireland in the game for so long through their errors, because an Irish team operating off 69% line-out really doesn't have a right to be in a game, because that's such an important part of it. And yet they were getting penalties to kick to the corner. They were taking their points. Obviously, Crowley put one wide, he put the other one over. That was a tough kick. There was so many openings for Ireland within that game, which makes the 63 minutes with 3 points all the more alarming.
Yeah, and I think something that we should mention in that regard as well, that they lost 2 of their best players early on, Scott Barrett and Geordie Barrett. Scott Barrett is their captain. He was unbelievable in that game last November. I think he's still a bit underrated. He's their line-out leader as well. So he went off, and Ireland's line-out still struggled without Scott Barrett there. Geordie Barrett, look, we all know, Leinster fans have watched him enough, and every other fan, we know how good he is. He went off really early as well. Now, that said, I thought Lester Fainanuku was excellent when he came on. He absolutely roasted Gary Ringrose on the outside in the build-up to the try. I think Ringrose will be really disappointed. I think he's still making some big hits. When he hit Bowden Barrett in the second half, initially I was wincing, thinking he could be in trouble here, but obviously he wasn't. But I'd like to see more from Gary Ringrose as an attacking threat. He's become this defensive monster, which is all well and good, but I think in that 13 channel, you'd like to see a bit more creativity, just as Fainanuku did by going on the outside. Tommy O'Brien, even though he didn't get in the game, had a monster hit as well. I think the play got called back anyway. So those defensive hits are already good, but I think you need to marry it more with an attacking threat. And losing those 2 key Barrett brothers for the All Blacks, and they still managed to deliver that performance. If Ireland had lost 2 key guys, you kind of wonder if they'd be able to deliver as big a performance as that, because they seem to just get their heads down. Like, they compounded mistakes, like you touched on. Like, a big thing of theirs is like next moment focus, but that seemed to go out the window a lot.
Yeah, they seem to have baggage from the mistakes, and their confidence just drained as soon as that try went, the Tamati Williams try, and New Zealand took the lead off the Bowden Barrett conversion. It just they never looked likely to get back into the game, and it was only a 1-point game. There was no need to panic at that stage.
And I wonder, it's a great point, I'd like to, in terms of those doubts creeping in, because what I think back to is, we'll go back a year, we won't go back any further, or we could go back to the World Cup quarter-final if you wanted to, but let's go back to the last big game last November against the All Blacks, which they were terrible in. They got blown away by France in the Six Nations. I know they beat England, but I think England are a different team now, and that Six Nations game will be fascinating next year. But Leinster losing the Champions Cup semi-final, they are carrying a lot of baggage. It's fair to say, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, they were bulletproof going to the World Cup. They'd come on off the back of that summer tour to New Zealand. They won a Grand Slam. They had Sexton. I think that's still a massive factor in this, and that's not a slight on Crowley or Prendergast. Neither of them are anywhere near the level that Johnny Sexton was at the peak of his powers at the World Cup, even at 38. And I'm not sure either of them is going to get to that level. And Ireland have to find a way of performing without Johnny Sexton. I still think there's a hangover from that, even though that I'm sure that'll be thrown back in the YouTube comments about, that it's a stupid thing to be saying 2 years after he's retired. But I just don't think. I think the team was so built. Andy Farrell's first team was so built around Johnny Sexton. They have struggled, despite the fact that they got a bit of a bounce in the first Six Nations. They have struggled to get anywhere near that cohesion, that decision making, that execution, the standards that he drove around them. And that shouldn't just come from one player, but it did for so long. That confidence that they all got from having him in the team, I think that's been draining from it. It wasn't a sudden thing at all, but I think it's been draining from them over for a while since. And it's more it's as much as a captain and as a presence as it was in that one specific role. There was never going to be a like for like replacement for him. But it's becoming more and more of an issue the more we watch this team evolve in the post-Sexton era. And now he's in the coaching ticket. It's partly his job to kind of come up with ways to solve it. At the same time, they were massively undercooked. I expected them to lose by about 10 points. They lost by 13. It's not the end of the world. And they can bounce back this month. There are, I think, worrying trends. But what do you expect Farrell to do this week now? If they're undercooked, does he rotate heavily for Japan just to kind of get fresh blood into the team? How do you kind of see the next couple of weeks unfolding?
It's stating the obvious, but it makes the next 3 games next month even more difficult, because if Ireland were flying home tomorrow on the back of a win, no matter what kind of win, we'd be having a very different conversation now. The mood music would be a lot better. I would expect a lot of changes for Japan, even though they're undercooked. I think the jet lag flying back will be a factor. Andy Farrell has touched on that. But that will make getting up to speed then the following week for Australia even tougher, won't it? And then you've got the Springboks lying in wait as well. And from a scenario where Ireland so rarely lost at home, a bit like the All Blacks losing their kind of invincibility in terms of they're this unbeatable force, which they're clearly not anymore. I don't think teams fear at all coming to the Aviva anymore, particularly when you look at what France did and what New Zealand did last November. I know Australia, as you mentioned, lost England today, but I think they'll be far better with the players that'll have to come back in, like Lennox, Will Skelton, because obviously today was played outside of the international window. But the pressure is on, and I think Andy Farrell knows the pressure is on. The age profile of a lot of positions in the team isn't great. I think he's well aware of that. I think he's well aware that they were undercooked. I do think I would expect him to bounce back, but if he heavily rotates as we expect the Japan game, it is a tricky balance, isn't it? Because he needs to get the players game time. He needs to get them sharp for what's to come the following. What do you think? Will it be wholesale, or do you think it'll be a bit of mix and match?
I think he's got to make changes, but I think the bench will probably come into the starting team. I think a couple of players from around the squad will come in.
But he's Norris back as well today, and his first carry.
His first carry was incredible. So I think it'll unfold as it unfolds during the week. We'll see what he does. I'm sure there's a plan. I wonder if the plan has changed based on what he saw today, whether he will see value in someone like Gibson Park, Dan Sheehan, just getting another run out in. But then there's also the fact that it's four games back to back. It's tricky, but we'll find out all about that this week, or as the week unfolds. And Joe and the lads will be back on Monday to bring you through it. We have a World Series decider to go and watch somewhere in Chicago, and lots of our Blue Jays, and lots of copy to file. All of the reaction, all of the analysis is up on the Irish Independent website, and we'll talk to you all again soon.